just a moment. Those people include David Bowles, Kelson Forsgren, and Daryl Jones, and we are excited to have them on our panel. Thank you to those of you who submitted questions at registration. You help us shape the webinar to suit your needs. And we also welcome questions during the webinar. If you have those, just put those into the questions tab on your control panel. Once again, we are excited to have you join us. And in just a moment, those slides will be available for you. So as you can see, our agenda will begin with defining value. What is that value? Then we will go into defining the proposition, then combining those to define a value proposition, then developing that value proposition and applying that value proposition in your proposals. And then we will move on to answer any questions that we had during the webinar. We will still answer those during as well, and a little bit of discussion. So without further ado, Kelson, I will turn the webinar over to you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We're glad that you're able to participate with us. Thanks for your patience. Grateful to be joined as well today by Mallory and David and Daryl. You'll get to hear all their voices some more. So thank you again. I wanted to, as we talked about on the agenda, to talk about what a value proposition is not. Some things here that we don't want to equate them to or use or define them as. So here's some things that it is not. A value proposition is not the same as a proposal theme statement. They have different purposes. They're still important in a proposal, both of them, but they have different purposes. We'll explain what some of those are as we go. A value proposition is not based only on features of your solution. If we're looking at that as the only way, that is not a true value proposition. A value proposition is not always written verbatim into the proposal. When we have one defined, and we're doing those by each opportunity and by each customer and each audience member, we're not necessarily going to take that and drop it in word for word into the proposal. It's not solely based on a monetary value. That is a component, but it is not the only thing that drives it. It's also not these items. It's not a slogan, a tagline, or a catchphrase that is part of your branding or part of your marketing. That's not what this is. And it's also not a list of definitions or specifications that you provide. So here's some things that a value proposition is not. David, would you take a minute then and kind of let us know what the first component is of our value proposition as to what constitutes value?
Sure, Kelson, thanks. I think one of the biggest things that we at Shipley see that is kind of frustrating is we get this feeling that value is in our eyes and it's in our solution, and because we think it's important, we've invested a lot of money, time, effort, people, we feel that that is value. And as you just saw on Kelson's slide, that's not accurate. Value always has to be 100% in the mind of the customer. We have to get rid of this thought that we are providing a solution. We need to offer a document that responds to their needs and gives them value in their eyes, not our eyes. And that's significantly different. And so what do some of those values look like in their eyes? They go ahead and scroll down, Kelson. Are you stuck? You know, what those can be is it can be in the form of monetary payback or savings. In other words, you have spent so much money now. By investing in this, we expect that you'll have this amount of savings over a period of time. It can be in a competitive advantage. We will give you the capacity to do this, and because of our system, because of our capability, of our capacity, no one else will have that. So you will have a competitive edge in offering something to your end users. It can be in the form of a competitive advantage. You can do it, nobody else can. And if you can offer something that meets your needs but also gives you an edge, that is a significant value. Efficiency gains, because you're investing in new software, new hardware, new production facilities, new training that articulates a better process and a practice for your people, and they can learn it faster. That picks up efficiencies, and that picks up faster, quicker response times and less downtime, and that's huge to end users. And cost is the bottom line there. And then finally, discriminators. Discriminators is something you have that no one else has that the customer wants. Again, it's not so much that you have it, but does the end customer need it? All of those define value.
Right. Thank you, David. So that's the value portion of a value proposition. Now, Daryl is going to introduce to us the proposition portion of that statement.
Thanks, Kelson. Appreciate that. Well, this is pretty straightforward, really. You just think of a proposition as an offer with some type of benefit. That's, to me, the easiest way to think about it. The similarities between the words proposition and proposal being an offer. There are other definitions in the dictionary, like a premise or a concept, argument. But for the purposes of this presentation, just think of a proposition as an offer with a benefit. So then that leads to the next slide, which is, what is a value proposition? There seems to be a lot of confusion around this, and it didn't take me much longer than a quick Google search to see that there are a lot of different ideas out there. But as Kelson said, there are many things that a value proposition is not. There were some good examples out there, but many people in this industry have a value proposition confused with a slogan or a catchphrase or a soundbite, something like that. That's really not what it is. So as we think about this audience of capture proposal professionals listening in, let's define it as an offer demonstrating measurable value, worth, and improvement to the customer. And I think I would probably even go a little bit further to kind of piggyback on what David said, that it's measurable worth as defined by the customer. And of these bullet points in terms of defining the value proposition, bullet number one, I think, is the most important and most often overlooked. And I want to just maybe do a real quick example here that will hopefully help you think about value propositions a little bit differently. So let's suppose you have three people on the same day who walk into the same supermarket, and all three of them go back to the produce section and they pick up and buy an orange. So everybody walks out with an orange, and you would assume that the value that these three people are hoping to gain from buying the orange would essentially be the same. They like oranges, they're going to take it home and eat it. But suppose that one of the people did in fact do that, just took the orange home and peeled it and ate it. That's the value that they were hoping to receive from buying the orange. But the second person actually bought the orange for the purposes of baking. They took it home, got the orange zest from the peel, put it in the recipe, and baked something. And then the third person didn't even like the taste of oranges, but they loved the smell of it. Their plan was to take it home and put it in a fruit bowl on the counter so they could smell the scent of orange in their kitchen. So they had exactly the same, they bought exactly the same product on the same day, but their perception of value was defined by them, certainly not by the grocery store nor the producer of the orange. So the point really there is that as you're thinking about value propositions on a specific deal and for a specific customer, you cannot assume that the value that the buyer is hoping to gain from your service or product or solution is the same as other customers. That has to be something that is developed or defined collaboratively with your customers. And you may even have in the same organization different stakeholders who are looking at your solution to provide value in different ways for them. So this can't be done in isolation. It assumes that you have salespeople, if you're in a commercial environment, that are asking the right questions, trying to understand what the issues are that the client is trying to solve, and coming up with definition of value as it's seen by the customer. And so it really boils down, as many things in proposals and selling, to customer focus, and something that is done over time through relationships and trust. And so that's a key element of it. The next three bullets, the next bullet we'll talk about more later on, but essentially the discriminators that you find in your offer and the win strategy that you have for winning the deal, they should be central to your value propositions, because it really boils down to this. If you have a discriminator, which is something that the customer wants and you can provide but your competitors cannot, those are the most powerful value propositions, and they need to be brought out. They're the ones that really most increase your probability of winning. The next three bullets have to do with measurement of results. We'll spend a little bit more time on that, as well as putting a framework around the time frame in which the customer will realize the benefits and the value that they're seeking, and then back to the metrics of what that will mean to them in terms of things like improved efficiency, cost savings, increased revenue, etc.
Great, thanks, Daryl. I like your orange analogy. That was pretty good. I could imagine that in my head, being each of those three buyers and seeing that the value for each of them would be different, and the need for us to target those needs of our customers accordingly. So we want to, as we're talking about value propositions, we want to clarify some other language commonly used in capture and proposal activities that Shipley uses to help define some things. And this will hopefully start to address some of the other questions that that you have been posting as part of this webinar anyway. And we'll try to get to some of those a little bit later after we get some more groundwork underneath us. But here's some vocabulary that is important in understanding the context here for value propositions. First of all, when we talk about the term features of our solution, it's something that is an attribute or aspect of our product or service. So some examples that are there are the speed or completion of schedule or how much revenue is collected, et cetera. So in the context of our communications with the customer, our features are the what. What are we delivering? We talk then about benefits. These are the beginning of the creation of value for the customer. What does the customer value? So the benefits are those things that solve a problem for the customer. So other items are listed there as that. The term that we like to use for that is so what. If you have a feature of speed, well, so what? Does that matter to the customer? What does it help them do? So a benefit is the so what. Following that are discriminators. David talked about this a little bit before. They are benefits that are important to the customer and unique to you. Only you can deliver that specific benefit. So again, we're looking at from the perspective of the customer, not our own perspective. Following that is a win theme. Terminology. This terminology refers to themes that link features and benefits to the customer and demonstrate value. They indicate why our solution and our benefits and anything else like that with discriminators are of value to the customer. They point to why the customer should select us over our competitors. And at the end here, we're talking a theme statement. When we use that terminology, it means a statement in our proposal that highlights our benefits by emphasizing discriminators or features. So something that specifically is pointing to the customer how they benefit from something that we are providing. And if we have benefits, if we know of our customers' hot buttons, if they've identified things that they specifically want us to address, either in a requirement statement or in talking about here's some problems that they would like to solve, then it gives us an opportunity in our response to link the benefits of our solution to addressing those hot buttons. And it gives them reason to read further or select us as a possible winner. So one of the questions that we have, Mallory will read for us.
Yeah, so we had a question come in during this, and I think it fits really well with this slide. So, and I'll just open it up to the group, whoever would like to take a shot at answering this. Is there a difference between a value proposition, a strength statement, and a win theme, or is the terminology interchangeable? So, David, maybe you could take a stab at this.
I mean, repeat the second half of that. Is it what are we comparing?
So, comparing a strength statement and a win theme, is the terminology interchangeable, or are they completely different?
I could see them being used interchangeably. I mean, what you're trying to do with a theme statement is you are trying to set up the following section or the following paragraph. And what you're trying to do is get the evaluator so excited that they want to read on. And there would be a lot of elements between the two that would be common. Sometimes you would maybe not see a dollar measurable amount because it would be prohibited, and sometimes that describes value. But a good theme statement, as Kelson will show you later today, will have elements of value in it, but it may not, just because of the structure of the document. But there would be a lot of similarities between the two. You might just be a little bit restricted to what the document allows, like, for example, no costing or no pricing or no this or that. But if you can show a value that says we can show you an increase in this kind of efficiencies, or we can show you a rate of return over this amount of time, that kind of theme statement would certainly get an evaluator interested in reading the rest of the paragraph or the resulting section, which is exactly the same goal that a powerful theme statement would have right off the bat as well.
Okay, thanks, David. Anything you want to add to that, Daryl?
No, I think that's a great job. The only other thing I'd say is probably in terms of the value proposition is maybe just a little bit more strict in terms of its real definition, as it includes elements of things like return on investment and measurements. It's a little bit higher in many cases than a theme statement. But that's, like David said, there are subtle differences between the two.
Right, and we're trying to help, in putting the microscope on these, kind of help to separate them and understand a little bit of the differences. But some of the elements do combine together when before we're actually developing the proposal, things that can help contribute to our understanding and our explaining internal to the company some of the things and the values that we expect to be able to show the customer, as well as in it reflecting in our document. That was one of the questions that also came up. Do we have any perspective or point of view on the creation of internal value proposition statements as a means of understanding the socializing of the value of the deal to internal decision makers who are in control of BD spend? yeah, that's a tremendous way to be able to target a different customer set for what you're looking to do with your bid. If you are looking at creating a value proposition based on your customer and their need, then looking at those who control your internal budget as a customer and what their need is, if you can focus a value proposition or a statement there for them to be able to help sell your effort going forward, I think that's a positive way to use this as well. You probably won't use that same statement then in your proposal because your customer will be different. But that's a good question. Thank you. Let's take a look then at a little bit more about explaining about this value proposition. It is going to be based on the win strategy. And here are some steps that, as part of Shipley's process that we've helped to codify regarding win strategy development, things that occur before a proposal actually is developed. Here are those components. We take a look at analyzing the strengths and gaps. We have our customers' information, and we know what they're asking and what they're requiring of us. Then we kind of look at how our competitors are going to match up against that. Again, based on the customer's perception of our customers and how we match up against that based on how the customer perceives us. If we don't have some of that insight as to how the customer sees our competitors or us, then we're kind of making some guesses, but we're still trying to educate our guests by looking at possibilities of weaknesses, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, SWOT. We try to then demonstrate and articulate what the customer cares about. What value are we providing to them that they care about? Try and identify that and explain that a little bit better so we understand features and benefits, and then the discriminators that come with that, and then the opportunity then to looking at our different customer sets or people that we need to interact with, determine to whom and how to convey that value proposition. Activities that can occur prior to the proposal process, and then again being emphasized in the proposal, possibly to address the needs of various customer levels looking at our proposal. And then we want to make sure that we show the customer how our solution meets their definition of value. Going back to the oranges, are they looking for taste? Are they looking for smell? Are they looking for a good rind, zest to cook with? How are we going to meet their definition of value?
So, Kelson, what does SWOT stand for those who may not know?
Yeah, SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Our strengths compared to others, weaknesses, our weaknesses compared to others, opportunities that we have if we're better than somebody else, on one of our competitors, and we can capitalize on that by highlighting some weakness they have, not by naming them, but by highlighting a potential flaw or defect in a competitor's solution or process or deliverables, etc. And then threats are where someone may be able to do that to us, and how do we counteract that? Okay, that's great. So let's look at a couple of things about what this SWOT will actually help us to do. It does require some analysis. So let's look at these things. If we, in our process, take the time to look at how we compare against each competitor, or we can do that somewhat in aggregate, but still we need to look at how we compare versus each competitor and see if we can come up with things that define our differences, what makes us better and different in the eyes of the customer. Those become discriminators. We want to make sure that as we're looking through this information that we're doing with our competitors, that we're challenging our own assumptions. If we don't know something factually or have some third-party validation, and I know that may be really strict in the sense of what information we may actually have, but as we're doing our efforts going forward, we can't just assume that we know everything about our competitors and assume that we know how the customer will receive that. So we need to be careful about just thinking, yeah, we're the best and we're going to be fine and we don't have to distinguish against anybody. And the final thing here is to, with our team, with our sales team, with our implementation team, our program management team, elements of how we're putting together the solution, how we're making things defined, we need to build consensus amongst ourselves on what our offer is and then what the corresponding value proposition is for our related customers. So it requires this analysis of looking at how we're faring with our customer versus how our competitors are, and seeing where we can make distinctions in how we're presenting that. Now I'm going to ask David now to kind of continue forward with how to articulate that value in the WIN strategy, and talking about discriminators and what the customers also may want to measure. So go ahead, David.
So we are suggesting to you that we have to create value in WIN strategies. And so that begs the question, where do our WIN strategies come from? And Wilson has just set up a strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, SWOT. Another way to look at it is through our strengths, our weaknesses, our customers' strengths, and their weaknesses. One of the things that we have to be particularly aware of is we all feel that we have strengths. That's why we're bidding. We look at bids that are in our core competencies that we can do well. You know, if we're a car manufacturer, we're not going to go out and bid on airplanes. We're going to bid on providing, you know, a carpool of transportation to a government agency or a hospital transportation or whatever. We're going to be in our sweet spot. But others are going to compete against us, and they may have better options and better strengths. And so one of the things that we have to acknowledge here is that on the surface, the initial, capture planning may suggest that they could offer better value than we could. And so on that second box there where we have to mitigate our weaknesses and risks, we have to address that because our competitors are going to suggest that's the very reason why they should be selected and we shouldn't. So part of our value has to be, what's it going to take for us to overcome that weakness? And we have to have an answer to that, and we have to suggest it. And it could be through a partnership. It could be through the purchasing or the merger of another company into ours to give us that capacity. There's a lot of different ways, but we can't ignore it. That's the bottom line here. And then if they do have strengths that we don't have, what are we going to do? Very similar to, probably our weaknesses, because, that would kind of go in line with their strengths. What are we going to do to offset those? If we can't, why are we bidding? And so we have to be able to convince ourselves, again, remember what we said, based on what is of value to the customer, what can we do to overcome our competitors' strengths? We need to be able to, that's all part of capture intelligence, capture gathering, and so on and so forth. We have to have answers to that. We just can't ignore that. If not, again, why are we bidding? And the fourth one says, they too will have weaknesses. Okay, they can't be better than us in everything. Then really, why are we bidding? But the point is they will have weaknesses, and our capture intelligence should be able to tell us where can we exploit their weaknesses, which creates value for us. And so on these four circles into a value which creates or increases our probability of winning, I would suggest to you that all of our strategies, all of our themes come from one of these four areas. I've worked on a lot of proposals, and all of our strategies that we create, our actionable items to get to a value, stem from one of these four circles. So keep these in mind because they are the foundation for all the strategies which create all your value.
Excellent. Thanks, David.
Yeah. Okay, discriminators. This is kind of a fun slide. Kelson, you can open it up. I'm going to tell them a story here real quick. Daryl got me going on the oranges here. So what is a discriminator? I grew up in the telecommunications world. I live in Denver, Colorado. One of my accounts was the military down in Colorado Springs. And this is not classified, but it's sensitive. There are 3 bases down in Colorado Springs that are the foremost detection of missile launches in the world, not in the United States, but of the world. And prior to the Afghan conflicts and the Desert Storm conflicts, it was incredibly important, incredibly important. There was a 2-minute window from the time an offensive rocket was launched against the United States in their services, determine whether it was friendly fire or international, or it was, aggressive enemy fire. And we relayed that information that came from Schriever Air Force Base. We relayed that to Cheyenne Mountain, but it had to go through Peterson Air Force Base switch. So there was a circle of 3 systems, okay? So what's the point there? All of our competitors at that time had the capacity to offer, telecommunication connectivity between Schriever and the Peterson Air Force Base and NORAD Cheyenne Mountain, which was the defense headquarters of the United States. So was that a discriminator? No, everybody could do it. Does the customer need connectivity that is incredibly reliable? If we could not get them that information in 2 minutes, what happens? What happens is that missile goes undetected and it lands in one of our military bases and it kills tens, thousands of people. We cannot have that ability. So we need to be able to stress reliability. Do we have that capability and then some? Yes, we do. But, if we have it and they have it, is a discriminator? No. If we have it, but the customer, in this case, the United States Air Force, if they don't want it, what value is it? Now, in this case, our solution was independent fiber optic network. No 2 strands of fiber were closer than 10 feet apart. We had 3 of them, so the probability of all 3 of them being cut at the same time was virtually negligible. If one was cut, the transfer of information flow was measured in the millionths of a second, which is essentially imperceptible. We, US West, at that time, was the only company that could offer that reliable, you would never lose streaming capability. Is that a discriminator in a war situation? You bet it is. So a neutral position is everybody else has it. Sure, fiber was available by everybody, so that's really not a discriminator. What if they didn't need it? Well, okay, then that was shame on us for trying to propose something they didn't need. But in this case, because of its speed, of its redundancy, of our switching network, because we were the historical Bell Telephone company that offered all the infrastructure that supported it, we could offer the redundancy and the fail-safe mechanism that essentially guaranteed absolutely 0 loss of service. And when you're talking 2-minute windows to detect an inbound missile, to give the end people, the warfighter, human beings with lives, to give them time to, protect themselves and take cover, you cannot have a failure. And so in this case, the Air Force bought our solution because we guaranteed them no loss of connectivity in sharing that information between those 3 circuits. So that's the discriminator. It's something that you have that the customer wants, that they see criticality in it. And when you're talking about Department of Defense bids, the warfighter's life and saving that life, preserving that life, there's nothing more important than that. And so, what we can do to discriminate in our favor to protect that are very, very powerful discriminators that we need to look for. And we need to understand, this bid was really not to the Air Force. Yes, it gave them a capacity, but what were they trying to do? They were trying to protect what? The human lives on the other end. So we need to know and understand who that end user is and offer discriminators that we can provide that nobody else could. Next slide there, Kelson. So, you know, what, you know, a value is measurable. And so, you know, one of the things that we got to be careful, this can be a two-edged sword, is what can we do to prevent people from turning over? Can we offer a capacity? Can we offer a work environment? Can we upgrade their you know, a simple thing like, hey, we're going to give everybody new computers. That's great. I mean, some people, you know, that's huge. That prevents them from saying, oh, I don't like this place anymore. You know, things like that. What can we do to prevent turnover? Or, you know, what can we, but what we don't want to do is prevent something that, because it's so efficient or so mechanized or so, you know, new leading edge, that, you know, it will take people out of the loop. We got to be careful there. But, you know, what we're trying to do is suggest something that will make the culture and the lives of the end users much more willing to stay and be excited about working there. Percentages. Hey, if you do this, we can, you know, we'll give you a 10% greater return on your investment. You know, we have historical evidence that of the hundreds and hundreds of end users that we've done, our you know, our data suggests that they have averaged 10% greater rate of return because of, you know, the efficiencies of the products and or the services that we're giving them. Or, you know, hey, this new vehicle gets 35 miles to the gallon. Your other fleet vehicles only gave you 20. That's 150% greater return on your investment. And what's that equate to? Lower fuel costs, savings of dollars. That's the third one, dollars. What can you do that suggests, you know, I have this that can save you dollars because we're going to do this. The fourth one is time versus investment. You know, if it used to take 3 or 4 days face-to-face in a training class with all kinds of people that had to be sent all over the United States to go face-to-face, but now, you know, we're going to give you an online mechanized virtual training, no loss of work, you know, that kind of time versus investment. Sure, it's going to cost you a little bit, but now you don't have travel. Now you don't have people that are not there for their job on a daily basis. That's a huge savings. And again, it gets down to efficiency, and it gets down to performance, and it gets down to saving dollars. And then, of course, accuracy. You know, if you were only 20%, you know, one of the past performances I worked on was rocket launches. And, you know, one of the things, orbital accuracy, how close to the point in space can you get this payload? And, you know, it's an awful big space out there. And the company I was working for was essentially saying we can get it to within about a 30 meter, folks, that's 100 feet. 100 spherical feet in space, we can essentially put your payload at that point. And the benefit to the customer was they didn't have to expend very precious payload fuel to fine-tune that position. We, as the expendable rocket launch provider, would say, we will get it there for you. Can you see the value and the benefit to them by saying, we'll put it to within 30 meters? And therefore, you can save all that. So down the road, when it starts to move, you'll have more fuel to extend the life of that payload. So those are just some of the things that they want to measure. But again, it gets back to what is important to the customer and what value do you offer through discriminatory capabilities that you can provide. And these are just 5 of the quickest, easiest ways that you can offer those values to your customer.
Wonderful, David. Thank you very much. We wanted to take a minute also and answer some questions that came in prior to the course, some of you that submitted for registration, and wanted to bring those up. I'm going to ask Daryl to address this one first.
Okay, I will, Kelson. Believe it or not, we hear this one a lot. We hear this one a lot. It's the challenge that proposal teams have in getting good information about the opportunity what the customer is trying to accomplish, things like that, in order to create value propositions. And this is a tough one. So this is more from my experience, what I'd suggest you do, because, hey, I'm a sales guy and I worked with salespeople for 30 years, so I kind of know what makes them tick. I think the most important thing here is appealing to their self-interest. If you think about the line from Jerry Maguire, help me help you, just let them know that you'll be able to do a better job in positioning them to win and close the deal if you have a little bit more information. Kelson, if you'll go to the slide, the next slide, please. I won't really go through this in a lot of detail, but what you're trying to get from them is an understanding of the issues or concerns that the customer has that our solution may address, and then some of the business objectives. What are they trying to accomplish? You might consider either just, the simplest way, call them an interview, but if you want to have a standard sort of checklist or information gathering tool that you provide to the salesperson as part of your preparation and kickoff, that could be effective. And ask them to identify the kinds of things that you see here on the slide, and more importantly, to prioritize, say, those objectives on the one or two that are most important. Excuse me, most important to the customer, because that's where about 80% of the decision will fall, is in the top one or two objectives or concerns that they have. So that's probably the way I would think about that. And then, of course, ask them to highlight, if they can for you, is there anything in our offer that you know of that the customer really wants that we can provide that none of our competitors can? And that's the issue of discriminators. So that's how I would think about it.
Great. Thank you, Daryl. Here's another question that we kind of addressed a little bit before, but we want to show some examples now going forward. How is a value proposition distinguished from win theme or theme statement? The way that I'm going to show you this is in the context of how a value proposition can be used throughout the proposal, because it can be tied into those other elements, but the role that it provides, the components of the value proposition we kind of talked about, having something that is interesting to the customer to measure, be able to have some benefit component and something that they are able to get some return on. It's time bound. So let's look at a way that we can maybe show how a theme statement as part of our proposal might include something with a value proposition. Here, for example, is a theme statement going to our customer, Outdoor Sports Global. We are, in this example, we are serving we're the company called Vibrant, and we are developing and implement customer relationship management systems. So that's the context of this theme statement. Outdoor Sports Global will reduce the cost of sales tracking and lead nurturing campaigns by selecting Vibrant to implement a CRM system that reduces overall marketing costs by 35%. In building theme statements, we want to make sure we're highlighting the customer and how they will benefit. Here's the benefit or the impact to them by using our feature. And if we can give a quantified return or a value statement for them, this is one way that we can incorporate value proposition into a theme statement. But you wouldn't see this language here being the value proposition. This is a theme statement we're using in the proposal, but we have elements of value proposition here. How about if we make that a little more detailed? We're leading again with our customer. Here's a quantified benefit. We just had a benefit listed before about reduced marketing costs. Here we've quantified that benefit and strengthened the impact of reduced marketing costs by 35%, and we're giving it a timeline. We're time binding it to make sure that there's a set period of return. Here's our feature again, and here's a potential actual dollar amount of return on their investment. So elements here inside of a theme statement could include value proposition components that we could then leverage, continue to leverage throughout the proposal. Because you could reemphasize again, when you're talking about the 35%, later in your document, you could talk about what activities helped you to reduce those marketing costs and what that result would be, or how you got to that $225,000 ROI per year, or how you anticipate being able to target that ROI in 2 years. So elements of the value proposition you will continue to use throughout the proposal, but here's one way that you can incorporate it into a theme statement. We talked a little bit before also about the win theme and how that differentiates a little bit from the theme statement and the value proposition. And we'll get to summarize all this a little bit again too as we go forward. Daryl, let me come back to you on this one. Can a value proposition be shown through graphics instead of in writing or just in text?
Yeah, it was a great question, and the answer is yes, absolutely. And I think it's part of the confusion around value proposition that people think of it as strictly a written statement. But graphics are really powerful. As we all know, we worked in proposals that about 2/3 of us learn and retain information visually as compared through text. So anything that you can do graphically to show the value proposition, all the better. So graphics, for example, will make our value proposition more apparent. It's just so that people just somehow don't miss it. It makes it many times easier to understand and digest as compared with something like you see on your screen. Having this in text, it can be very confusing. You do a nice visual or graphic, and it takes you just a few seconds to understand what the value proposition is. I also think about it from the standpoint, this is why I think about these kinds of things when you submit a proposal, is when you get to the evaluation stage. Somebody's going to make a decision on this. So what visuals can do is make it easier for the evaluator to choose you. And then a step further, I know this is real common in a commercial environment. I think about, so there's somebody in that organization that's going to take my proposal and make a decision, but they've also then got to take it up maybe to another level in the organization to get final funding approval. So what I want to give them, and particularly as it relates to the financial aspect of this, the business volume, the cost volume, pricing, whatever you call it, is stuff in the proposal that I can envision them cutting and pasting and putting into their own PowerPoint presentation and taking it forward to senior management. That it's so clear and it's so powerful that your customer could brief it at a higher level of their organization. So yes, this is a great way to communicate value propositions and should be part of your proposal strategy throughout.
Great. Thanks, Daryl. Nice graphic work there. All right, David, as wrap up for this session here about value proposition, do you want to talk a little bit about where this can be applied?
Everywhere. Folks,
okay.
If you look at some of the statistics that are out there from the federal government arena, and I'm going to guess that it's mirrored in the civilian and commercial, one of the most popular contract vehicles that the government chooses to contract is that of best value. Why? Because they want the right that if you can show them best value according to who? According to them. If you can show them best value with something that you can offer them that somebody else can't, and even though your solution might be 5 or 10% more than, guess what? Because it's a value to them, they see a need for it, it'll support their customers, they will opt to take it. So what is that saying? We need to be constantly thinking, where should we be sharing best value with? And, we've just gotten through theme statements at the beginning of key sections, key paragraphs, key volumes. That's obviously a place that when our evaluators are reading, that sucks them into it, and you want them to see themselves purchasing it because they understand the value and it's very specific and relatable to them. It starts with the executive summaries, whether it's a formal request or whether it is or it's just, the beginning of a section that says you've got an introductory summary, is obviously needs to be there because you need to get these people excited about what you are offering. What is your value? What is your proposition that no one else can offer? So get them excited. It can start with a cover letter. That's the first thing typically when somebody opens up from your senior most champion. Hi, this is so-and-so. We're very excited to offer our solution to you. And this is our value proposition. This is why we think you need this and based on your needs and, no one else can offer it. So you're starting it right there. A lot of people, especially the executives, and what do the executives have that very few other people have? They have the capacity to buy. And how do they read? A lot of us will read by the pictures. They'll scan the whole entire document, and all they're doing is looking at the pictures. And if they're seeing something that excites them, oh, yeah, this is what I need, what are they going to do? They're going to look at the caption. And if you're just saying, hey, here's a rocket launch, oh, that's nothing. Hey, this rocket is got the heavy package, and it's the only rocket currently certified by the Air Force to get to outer Earth orbit. You're like going, oh, wow, there's a benefit. They're the only ones that can do that, and they're assuring me they can get me to Mars or Saturn. All proposal sections, not only does it start with your theme, but throughout, you are showing the discriminator, showing the benefits based on what and who, them, and why it satisfies their needs. You are encouraging them. You are driving their desire to purchase from you because you are creating value in your mind. And then finally, anytime you're going face-to-face, folks, please have a 30-second elevator speech or at least a very quick synopsis that says, hey, what are you offering? It's not the time to stutter. Or think about it. It's got to be right there. It's got to be very, very quick, very, very concise, very, very customer focused. It's got to show a value, and it's got to give them a reason based on their needs and discriminatory issues from your perspective as to why they should buy from you. And that's the key to it.
Wonderful, David. Thank you so much. So in summary, let's kind of go again over the value proposition components. This is going to be of interest to all of you as you're putting these together. This is something that you can come back to. We talked about quantified improvement, something that's measurable. How are they going to improve? There's a timing element to it. Obviously, there's a component of solution that you'll be providing. Results, measurement, or tracking that will help them get to where they need to go. There'll be a cost component and an ROI or payback component. These are all things that can be included in your value proposition. And as you can see, there are a lot of elements there that you can then have that flow throughout everything that you're including in your communication with your customer, as David just articulated. So it's a wonderful tool that can be used internally, externally, any communication with your customer, communication with your teams to help them see value as well. And just at the end here, there are a couple things that we wanted to quickly answer. One was about SWOT. If you have a lot more competitors than maybe just a couple that you might look at, one thing you can consider doing is highlighting the major competitors and then grouping others that might be similar or having the same kinds of things. You don't want to make this exhaustive. You want to be able to keep concise in focusing on how you need to achieve what you need to with your customer and who your main competitors are on that. So we want to thank you again for the opportunity to share this with you. And here's the opportunity that you have to follow us in a lot of ways. And I'll let Mallory take us home.
Yes, so we are so grateful that you could join us. Once again, we love when you join us on social media. So take the opportunity to follow us there. And we will post this presentation on our website by tomorrow. So be looking for that. You can see it under our resources tab and under webinars. And don't forget to also under that tab on our website and at this link to register for the next one, Characteristics of Winning Proposals. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Kelson.
And thank you, David and Daryl, for joining us too.
You're welcome. Thank you.